Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 20. So, as you might know, this episode will start after about a half-year-long time skip since the last video. Only 2 changes were made. We stopped exporting lumber, so our trucks can focus on selling the much more lucrative steel instead, and we have 2 extra dumpers importing iron for the steel mill. That's about it. As for what you can look forward to, well, you can expect to see the small monument for our intrepid little track layer be put to use at long last, and we will also start building a new farming space near the border, because our biggest expenditure comes from buying the food our citizens need. Our population also grew a bit since we last visited. All the new space we set aside is filling up quite fast. By the end of the episode, it will all be completely full once more, so the next one will most likely deal with that issue. Right now, we are exporting steel quite reliably, which is a huge boost to our economy. But all good things come to an end, and we will start building stuff once more, so we can kiss this stockpile goodbye. We can also continue building things, so those 2 long stretches over the mountain are active once more. They are simple gravel roads, so they will be done relatively fast, especially since our gravel stocks are overflowing. And since the roads are completely upgraded around Estergrad, we can at long last designate the one-way arrows for them. We will experience a couple instances of buses and dumpers getting in each other's ways while those 2 roads are being built, but we will be able to fix those traffic jams quite easily. Now, this is something that occurred to me a couple hours before I started recording. We have these free distribution offices at our disposal. They don't all need to be at the same place. We can put them much closer to their intended pickup points, cutting down on fuel usage a tiny bit. Plus, freeing up that particular space will come in very handy when we start building the farm. Right now, we have 4 active ones. 2 for exporting the oil refinery products, 1 for selling steel, and the last one for coal. Thankfully, this meant we had 1 left unused, so we could just place it, send the trucks over, delete the next, rinse and repeat. That's it for the fuel and bitumen exports. We won't be saving too much fuel in this instance, but the trucks dealing with the steel exports is a whole other matter. They had quite a trek to make for pickups, so this will help them much more. Anyways, this is the first traffic jam in this area. It will happen a couple times, but we can just send the bus in front home, and it will all sort itself out. This little time jump gave us a lot of gravel to work with, so these roads will get their materials quite quickly. All these new workers in the fresh apartments are starting to clog up the internal commuter line for Estergrad. Time for a 3rd bus. Of course, I had to hitch a ride on one of the buses to make sure that's the reason for all the unemployment in those housing blocks, but yeah, we have too many people going to the tram stops these days. By the way, you might have noticed that I started waiting for vehicles to first enter the depot, and only assign them to their lines when they leave to refuel. This way, they will immediately start running their route, no need to fiddle with the flags in the line window. Anyways, this new bus should keep the workers going for a bit. And this is where I started to toy with the idea of retiring the old track layer. One of the reasons we are so desperate for steel is the increased rate of railroad construction, and we have the perfect excuse to lower that strain on our steel supply. We just needed to monitor the rail segment, to make sure only the small one can go to it. We need to be careful about this. Anyways, this is the second to last trip this little guy will ever make. It will take it 2 tries to completely finish the track segment. Also, I've been asked if I will give it a name, and of course I will. Since the main achievement of this track layer was made around Christmas time, I decided to go for Little Drummer, named after that famous Christmas carol. Speaking of names, I have 3 of them in the queue right now. BLO Polier, which is something I promised in the last series, and it will go to our future airport. We also have Udegrad. In Season 1, it was used for our lumber yard. This time I decided to rename Karbonov, because I just wasn't happy with that name. And the last one is Ust-Sriki Dolny, with nothing specified. I can only hope that I managed to make Polly pronounce them at least relatively close to correctly, but I already know that I will end up using nicknames. Making an English-speaking speech bot try to pronounce Polish and Montenegrin place names is a bit much. As usual, I was so busy playing the game, that I completely forgot to add the names again. I can only hope I will remember to include Udegrad and Little Drummer in the next episode. The other 2 will have to wait until something suitable comes up. Anyways, this is the last trip this track layer will ever make. It will finish building the track segment, but we will tell it to stop, preventing it from leaving. We just let it inch forward, until it reaches the center point of this display track, and then we can send it to the new train depot. This way, it will no longer take up space in the rail construction office, and all the workers can use the EDK300, not wasting workdays on an inactive track layer. Anyways, this is it. We have a nice little elevated display for our busy little worker bee. But of course, it's not done yet. We still need to build some walkways around it, plant some trees, the usual stuff we use for monuments. We also need to make sure the ground is nice and level around the hill, so it stands out, so that strip coming down from the main line has to go. To fully judge the surroundings, I decided to wait until the dirt is completely dry again. And I also decided to start with a blank canvas, so I restored the soil completely. Once it's all ready, we will continue working on this. Anyways, this was traffic jam number 2. Technically, the Little Drummer should be in the train depot, so only the EDK remains in the RCO. Speaking of which, maybe it's time to let it out again, and allow it to finish the main line at least, maybe even the town distribution branch. This is where I started looking for a good place for our new farm. I was convinced that it will be in that big empty place near Udegrad, but never hurts to look again. This one was also tempting, but I thought it was a bit too small. This will be it, I think. And if we have to, we can easily expand into the area near Ramasov's oil wells. This will be a relatively small farm, so I don't think it needs a big agro farm parking lot. A medium-sized one should be fine. But before we get started, we had to make room for the driveway. We still had these leftover stuff from our starting setup. Time to move them, so they won't be in the way. Like the steel exporting distribution office. As I've said before, placing it close to the pickup point will cut down on travel time quite a bit. We still have this one exporting coal. In retrospect, maybe we shouldn't sell it, it's barely making any money, so it's kind of pointless. We also have these 2 road depots. Maybe we could move them to the other side of the main highway, next to the Ramasov oil refinery. We can build 7 of these all together, and if we group them together, that's a quite sizable amount of parking space we can use for free. Bus traffic jam number 3. I don't remember, might get 1 or 2 more. As for our loans, we are making good progress. Almost $350K has been repaid already from these consolidated installments, and if all goes well, we could knock one out in an episode or two. Time to send over the microbuses to their new home, so we can move the depots themselves. That's it. 7 neat little road vehicle depots, ready for service. We still have the fuel station, and the coal export DO. The gas pump can just go on the other side of the highway. I made a bit of a mistake here. I accidentally told the main Kirkomov distributor to deal with the fuel deliveries, instead of the dedicated offices. This had the opposite effect that I wanted. It was too late, and the fuel is already being delivered to the new station. I tried to empty out the old one, but it didn't seem to work, and by the time things settled down, we had 20 tons of fuel in the old one, but all the vehicles just started using the new one, so it wouldn't empty out. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not all that bothered about wasting 20 tons of fuel. It's a couple thousands of rubles at best, so it's not a big loss. I should have just jumped on it, and deleted it right now, before the deliveries arrived. Oh well, as I've said, it won't be a big loss. I still waited a bit, maybe the fuel distributors will come and empty it out, but that's not what was meant to be. Anyways, one half of the mountain road is finished. The other side will follow in a couple minutes. Since we had nothing better to build, it was time to get the coal pickup station done at last. It's a small project, so it shouldn't take long. Also, while editing, I just noticed that I accidentally set the wrong building to be emptied. Whatever, the loss is minimal. Time to stop exporting coal. We can do this by simply reassigning the dumpers to one of the empty road depots. The clothing industry is in a bit of a slump right now. That's what I get for sending too many buses to the steel mill. But I have plans for those particular buses, so I will leave them be for now. Finally, the mountain road is about to be completed. And done. One less thing to waste workers on. This small construction office at the top of the mountain will be used to do a bit of groundwork in the area. Having access to these is incredibly useful. And unemployment is down a bit since we added that third bus to the internal commuter line. But it's not gone completely, there are still a couple people not getting work. Just as suspected, one of the tram stops has more people waiting in it than a single bus can handle. That's a clear indication that it's time to add a fourth one to the line. With the dirt all dried up, we can start working on this train display. First, let's remove the grass immediately around the tracks. Next, we should put some kind of a walkway around it, so people can come and look at it on foot, not just through their bus windows as they drive by. Maybe this rectangular shape isn't the best. Something a bit more oval should do the trick. Yeah, this will do nicely. So far so good. Maybe it's just me, but I don't like the grass. Cutting it all down might be better, and we can just place bushes for the greenery. Now we just need some trees around it to complete the picture. Since we had so much work done in the surrounding area in this session, some of the tree placements will be a bit finicky. We will get to a point where I'm fairly happy with it, but we might need to revisit after reloading the game for those final touches. That's the background trees done. We still need some bushes on the inside though. And for the first time ever, our ambulances were unable to respond to an emergency. Frankly, I'm surprised these two managed for this long. 2 more should be enough for a couple more years. That's most of the greenery done. We still need to wait for them to mature, so we can better judge if they are enough or not. Although it's too early, maybe we can still do a quick drive-by to see how it looks from ground level. Not too shabby. There are some clipping issues from such a low perspective, but I'm happy so far. And the EDK is already done with what we told him to do. Time to unpause more of the rail network. And the coal overflow station is finished. Time to set up the priorities in the relevant conveyor tower. This should ensure that all the production goes towards the steel mill, and only start unloading into this storage if that one is completely full. After finally managing to figure out how this interface worked, it was all ready to go. I'm not sure we will use that place to sell coal from, but it will be perfect for moving excess production to other parts of the Republic. Anyways, with that project done, it was time to start building Farograd at last. This will hit our steel reserves again, but at least it should allow us to stop importing iron once it's done. And I finally decided to get rid of that gas station, and start working on the farm at last. This space is pretty cramped, so don't expect to see too many big fields this time around. I mean, the majority of the farmed area will still be used by big fields, but in terms of raw numbers, the majority will be medium ones. Thankfully, the borders managed to wrap around the refinery station quite nicely. And we managed to route the road next to the power poles, so it was all going swimmingly. Time for a couple big boys. Obviously they are the most efficient way of doing farms, so I still wanted to make sure we use them wherever possible. And yeah, I was trying to line up the fences as best as I could. As usual, I was aiming for a maximum of 19 fields, so we can use a distribution office to pick up the harvest, and store it in a grain silo. But with such a small space, I really shouldn't have worried about keeping a tally. We will not get anywhere near 19 fields. We should be able to squeeze a couple more fields into this hole. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried, I simply couldn't make the rail tracks interact with the field fences in a way that I found satisfactory. There was always a bit of an overhang, and the fences were either too close, or downright on top of the rail tracks. We can't have that. 2 of these small fields will have to do. That left not very much space to build out the actual buildings that will deal with these farms. First, we need the central parking lot for the farming equipment. As I've mentioned before, we will just use a medium one. As usual, we will deal with the deliveries with a distribution office, so all 12 parking spaces can go to tractors and harvesters, no need for trucks. Next, we might as well build the food factory right here, so it's as close to the source of crops as possible. And since we have a workplace in the area, we could build a bus stop. Technically, only the factory needs workers to function, but if the buses bring in more workers than needed, we can just set it up in a way that any extra workers will go work in the fields. Next, we need some place to store all the freshly baked bread. A simple warehouse will do just fine. At this point, I decided that we might as well use a proper paved bus stop, since it would be best if we at least had gravel on the roads around the main buildings. To prevent the road looking bad, we should add a couple meters of extra gravel beyond the intersection. The only thing remaining was a place to store the fresh harvest. Ideally, the silo should be connected directly into the food factory, so a bit of rearrangement was needed. The large one from the workshop was way too big, so the vanilla one will have to do. Working around the rail tracks was a bit of a challenge to say the least. By moving the warehouse as far back as possible, we managed to make enough room for everything. It does need a bit of encouragement, but we're getting there. This would have worked, but the road was too close to the tracks for my liking. Let's try one last time. Much better. Only two things remain. One of these is power. Thankfully, the substation at the nearby clothing factory was almost close enough, so by moving it a little bit was enough to give power to everything important. By default, only the parking lot was without electricity. But to be as efficient as possible, we really needed to connect that up, so the tractors and harvesters can be refueled at home. Right across the tracks was close enough. Just needed to cut power to the clothing industry for a little bit to make it work. And this is where my wireless mouse ran out of power. I think this is the second time this happened during a recording. Just my luck. After a quick swap of batteries, we're back in business. With the trees a bit more mature, I think I'm happy with the display so far. Maybe a couple more bushes will help make it look a bit more lively though. But only near the bottom of the hill, placing them closer to the track might detract from the view. As for the surrounding forest, we can add a couple more trees back in, I think. At this point, we are only 100k away from being able to repay one of the loans in full. If we didn't resume constructions, and stuck to selling the steel, I'm sure we could have achieved this today, but we are in a good place regardless, so I'm not complaining. Anyways, we are getting close to the end, So let me jump into the usual ending monologue. I think I'm quite happy with today's progress. In financial terms, we are in a pretty good place, and we are well on our way towards eliminating the next biggest money sink we have, namely the food imports. I will have to see if the current setup is enough to satisfy the needs of the Estergrad citizens, and that will determine what I will do on the other side of the highway. If it's not enough, then it will just be more fields feeding into the food factory. But if we do get enough food, then we could turn that part of the map into a livestock farm, and start making some meat for our people. I'm sure they will appreciate the fresher slices of ham. I'm also pretty happy with the track layer display. It's a bit of a shame that it's out of range for people to visit, but if we were to place it inside the city, then we would have needed a bridge, and that's an expense I was not prepared to make for something like this. The workers can still see it from the buses though, so that's good enough for me. So, apart from the possible expansion of the farms, I think it's time to start planning that riverside train route that will go deeper into the mainland. I will obviously not allow the track layer to enter that part of the network for quite a while. We have enough to build as it is, but it won't hurt to be prepared. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.